In 2015, I wrote and published a book called Unspoiled Will Spoil You. It's a story of David Chukarian and his vision for this community, a vision that has guided the development of Bonita Bay since 1980. His vision can be stated simply: to build a community where man and nature live in harmony. And through decades of difficult decisions, his vision has become reality. We live on only 40% of the 2,400 acres that comprise Bonita Bay. A large percentage of the land is set aside for native wildlife habitats, including wetland, upland pine forests, and lakes and ponds that ultimately flow into Estero Bay, Spring Creek, and the Imperial River. We're all stewards of this unique habitat, and as our community ages, we need to be vigilant to assure that our past high standards are maintained, with special attention to the health of our lakes and wetlands. Through this video presentation, you can experience a short tour of some of the things that are being done to preserve our environment, and also to learn how you can help to support these efforts.
In January 2021, the BBCA Lakes and Wetlands Committee and resident volunteers sampled all of the BBCA lakes and reclaimed water lakes within Bonita Bay. The reclaimed water lakes are owned by Resource Conservation Systems, which distributes the reclaimed water it receives from Bonita Springs utilities to Bonita Bay to be used for irrigation. The samples we took were tested for nutrients such as nitrogen and phosphorus, free of charge through Lee County's Hyacinth Control District's monitoring program called Pond Watch.
We do the analysis of main components that are necessary to understand the waters of a pond, the nutrients such as phosphorus, nitrogen. Lee County Hyacinth Control District has expanded this educational program to respond to the problems that people have in their stormwater ponds. We ask them to bring every month the samples, because if we take one sample a year, that's not enough to tell us a story. We want to see how the pond behaves throughout the year. When the rain comes, there's a lot of changes that happens in the pond.
Excess nitrogen and phosphorus under the right conditions, warm water and abundant sunlight, create the ideal conditions for growth of algae and diminish the health of our lakes. Sources of these nutrients include fertilizers that we use on our lawns and golf courses, grass clippings that get washed into the lake after a rain, or blown into the lake, or blown into the street where they end up in the stormwater system. Other sources include domestic animal waste and erosion around our lakes. However, in Bonita Bay, one of the major contributors is the reclaimed water that we use in our irrigation system.
You have wastewater treatment plants who have excess water, and they have to dispose of that water somehow. So one alternative that they have is send it to communities who have a high demand for irrigation. The amount of nutrients depends on the wastewater treatment plant. You do an analysis of that water, sometimes they have extremely high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus because it's reclaimed water that has been treated, but they have not extracted those nutrients. Their communities use it for irrigation, but sometimes that water is so loaded that it will go into, percolates into the ground, runs into the ponds, and algae comes out of the use of this type of irrigation.
With the help of Lee County's Pond Watch program, we have been able to test all of our lakes and established a baseline of their nutrient content. Additionally, we have isolated those lakes that have the potential to impact our neighboring waterways, Estero Bay, Imperial River, and Spring Creek. We test those lakes on a more frequent basis. Overall, our testing suggests that with few exceptions, the nutrient level in our lakes is acceptable. Testing our lakes is just one part of exercising our responsibilities.
Our lakes and wetlands are the crown jewels of our environment. Recently, the Board of Directors of the Community Association adopted recommendations of the Lakes and Wetlands Committee to assess the overall health of our water and the impact of the water as it flows through our community. The initial assessment has been completed, and as we begin to implement monitoring of fertilizer use by all landscaper and contractors with the aim of eliminating unnecessary phosphates entering our lakes. You can tell a lot about the health of a lake from the kinds of fish that are in that lake. We surveyed each of the lakes, and we are currently monitoring each lake. Sediments build up at the bottom of lakes as they age. A lake can be progressively enriched with minerals and nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, a process called eutrophication. This can cause various water quality as well as engineering issues. To learn more, the Community Association contracted with the scientists and engineers at the Water School at Florida Gulf Coast University to conduct a year-long detailed study of each of our lakes. FGCU is examining the characteristics of the sediment, the nutrients in each lake, the water stratification, depth, levels of oxygen, and the amount of water flow, and the sources of the phosphorus and nitrates. As we work through these various challenges, it's becoming clear that a consistent, ongoing water monitoring program and testing is needed. It's not just one test and done. Ongoing testing is important.
I want to emphasize that each pond is almost like an individual person. It has its own personality. It has inputs that go and outputs. But the inputs of the pond, you have to almost recognize when the pond is having trouble. So by understanding, by measuring different parameters in the pond, you end up learning about what point the pond is going to crash. So you want to be before the crashing event happens. And that takes a lot of observation. So here's where the Pond Watch program comes in place, because you have volunteers who are looking the pond at least every month when they sample, and they make notations that there's something different this year, this month, and they can later on compare those notes with previous years to see if the behavior continues and behave the same way. Those are all educational factors that really plays a role when you start managing ponds.
Becoming aware of what is needed to maintain the beauty and wonder of this community is only the first step. As we gather information about what needs to be done, we will pass it along to you. You can play a major part in this effort by monitoring your landscaper to ensure they're only using approved fertilizer. The grass trimmings are not being blown into the lake, and the sprinklers are working properly and not spraying reclaimed water directly into the lakes. Please commit with us to protect our lakes, the crown jewels of Bonita Bay.